our first guest of the day. His name is David Zabarte from Keller Williams Realty. David, please take it away. Help us learn about who you are and what you do for the community. Thank you so much.
Ruben, thanks for having me back on to one of your shows. I think the last time was on a real estate specific show, and I had a lot of fun with your guests on that show. And so I'm happy to be here on this one for you. I've been a realtor now for almost 20 years here. I practice in the San Francisco East Bay. I specifically work with clients looking to buy or sell residential real estate. And I'm out of the Keller Williams Walnut Creek office, and I run the Rabbit Real Estate Group here. And let's see, I've got some Filipino heritage. My father was born in the Philippines, and I grew up kind of in two worlds, I guess. I think it's really a neat thing that you've got this group focusing on that, because one of my favorite groups of people is the Filipino community, because of how gregarious and friendly everybody is from the Philippines. That's one of my favorite things. And I think, being a business owner has so many challenges. And when you wake up in the morning, you want to get up and do something that gives you motivation to do it again the next day, and then the next day, and the next day. And part of that is having the right attitude. And if you are a friendly person, I think the chances are you're going to meet other friendly people in the world, and that's who you want to do business with. And that's kind of how I run the show for me. And it's allowed me to be quite successful in a very, very challenging career. And I'm happy to talk about anything having to do with running a business, because as a sole proprietor, a lot of times you don't know what you don't know until you get into it. And sometimes mistakes lead to the harshest lessons, but often very valuable lessons. And I try to learn as many of those lessons from other people's mistakes. And I think I've done a pretty good job. For many years, I ran myself as, just an independent contractor, as a sole proprietor. And then, once you start making enough money, and then you have to write a check to the government, if it's like, $50,000 that you got to write to a check for tax consequences, you start to think about, well, maybe there's something I'm missing. And, out of that, I, formed a S corporation, and, I run myself out of, my S corp, and I'm an employee of my S corp. And, this is the way that, America runs with businesses.
Yeah, no, that's great. So are you saying that when you're not having a good day, you call a Filipino to cheer you up? Is that what you're saying?
At least on a weekly basis,
Is it Ruben?
Ruben, if you were in the Bay Area here, you'd get roped into lunch and probably some beers, probably on a weekly basis, because that's what happened with your brother and I. I said yeah. I met with your brother, and I think we were at our kids' event. We went to a birthday party that was at like 8 a.m, and your brother Jeff heard me talking to one of the other parents about real estate, and so then he tapped me on the shoulder and said, are you in real estate? And I was like, I do loans and private investing, and I think we should meet up for lunch. And I said, okay, well, that's one of my favorite things to do. And after that, it's probably been every single week for the past 10 years now.
That's amazing. That's amazing.
That's a good relationship.
Yeah, so, that is a good relationship.
I think that, everybody's got challenges, and, reaching new clientele is one of the biggest challenges. And, for me, I'm a face-to-face person, and I'm a, belly to belly as much as I can get it. And so scheduling lunches and going out and spending time with people is a really, big factor for me. If I had the choice of going and knocking on doors or, cold calling people or going to a barbecue, I'll pick going to the barbecue because chances are somebody's going to want to ask you what you do for a living. And, when it comes to real estate, everybody has an interest in it. Whether you're, an owner or you're a renter, everybody has interest in real estate.
Yeah.
So it's easy to talk to.
You're a networker for sure. So since it's Freedom Friday, I'm going to ask a question that hopefully will get the wheels turning for everybody. You all chose to do what you specifically, you are doing. You had the freedom to choose that. But now that you've had the freedom to choose that, I mean, how does being an entrepreneur, working for yourself, how does that essentially materialize in your life? Like, what kind of freedom, what do you like the best about the freedom that being, working for yourself gives you? David, let's start off with you.
Well, that's an important question, and I think for me, having worked, for other people at some parts of my life, I never liked the idea that I was just selling my time, and my essentially your freedom is what you're selling, right? So I think growing up watching entrepreneurs, because my father was an entrepreneur from very early in his life. He was born in the Philippines during World War II. It was very, very difficult for his generation at that time. And, he always had stories about, I've been working since I can remember. He ran a shoe shine business in the Philippines, and then eventually he made his way to the United States, worked as a dishwasher, and then eventually opened up a gardening business, and then eventually he started one of the very first high-end landscaping businesses in my area, and I grew up in basically watching that business and working for wages in that business, digging ditches and planting plants, and eventually,
So you were his best employee, basically.
So, well, it was a learning experience for me, and I, even though I was involved in my father's business, it was his business, right? And he got to make all the rules, and he got to run it however he wanted. And as I got older, eventually I got old enough to realize it was never going to be my business, right? So, because
right, same thing. Yeah, same goes for when you work for somebody, right? And you realize
right. You're doing things the way that somebody else sees the world, and and I have very strong opinions, and eventually I just say, okay, well, I've got to go and figure out things for myself, and also having temporarily I worked for Round Table Pizza for a couple months as a delivery driver, and okay, well, that's still for wages, even though you're getting tips, or just doesn't it doesn't satisfy the soul, right? So
yeah, no, completely.
Eventually, I just was firm on the idea that to make it in the world, I'm going to have to start a business for myself, whatever that is. So once I graduated from college, I immediately found contracting work. I substitute taught, and that's that's an independent contractor position to begin with.
And so that was the start then, David. Are you saying? Is that
yeah.
right?
So just be able to have a say when you're going to work. The
Right.
reality is when you work for yourself, you're going to work all the time. Right?
That's true.
So
yeah.
Whatever it is that you do, ultimately it should be something that gives you some amount of joy, because you're going to be doing that all the time.
David has been keeping a secret from us. I guess you're in a book, Dave. I want to know all about that book.
Oh. Okay. Well, let's see. This was a book was written by an interviewer that had interviewed me I don't know. This was a few years ago now. I think could be maybe like 6 years ago. I was asked to come on, onto this interview show where I was asked all about kind of my history and how, my philosophy around selling real estate, and the end goal was that the interviews, I think me and maybe 7 others were compiled into a book, and it had to do with the real estate industry. And I think it's an interesting topic for a lot of people because there's a lot of misconceptions about what the industry entails, and it's a very gratifying industry to work in because there's a lot of dedicated professionals, but there's also a lot of people who get into it because they think that it's going to be easy and it's going to make a lot of money. And like anything that makes a lot of money, that's just one aspect of it, right? If it makes a lot of money, there has to be something to equalize out that aspect of it, and that is the fact that you got to work all the time and that you're taking on a lot of liability, and it requires numerous skill sets that you have to develop, and you have to be good with people, and you have to build trust, and on and on and on and on and on. And so that book, it takes the interview that we had and kind of distills that down into my section on what it was like to be in production, at that time at least.
Hey, last but not least, David, if you could just share what the challenges have been for you, or what are the things that you currently deal with, and how do you what advice would you give to anyone going through the same thing right now?
Well, I think the most important thing is that you have to have the right attitude, and it's when you're in a challenging industry where there's a lot of competitors, you can't let that crush you. And I think that's one of the challenges that I see with like newer agents that come through. If I get a chance to mentor a new agent, it's preparing them mentally, I think, for what they're taking on, because whenever you start something new, nobody knows about you. They don't know what you do, and you have to get yourself out there. But especially in an industry where you're going to be dealing with a product that's probably the most expensive item that people deal with in their entire life, there's a big onus on you to make sure that you're going to protect that interest between your client and what you're trying to accomplish for them. And so there's a lot of trust that has to be built, and that's challenging, right? And I think the approach that you take is going to determine whether or not you're successful. And you can't necessarily rely on friends and family to get you through the early phases, because whenever you take on something like that, you're radioactive, right? And your friends and family know that you're radioactive, so you might get your best friend or your mom or your brother, but other than that, you're probably looking at working the whole cold hard community, and they're going to rely on their instincts around you and basically what comes out of your mouth. So you have to really take on the responsibility of learning your field, whatever it is, and there's plenty of resources. So it's an opportunity for you to grow in a way that will allow you to become better and better and better as a person and as a knowledge worker.
As always, guys, maraming salamat. Thank you so much, Adam, Nikki, and Daryl. Your time and attention has been great today. Really appreciate it. It's not difficult. It's not easy to be in business, and your contribution today hopefully sparks a light or sheds a light on someone who might be listening that's really trying to do something, right? Really trying to get out there, but they don't know how to reach out. Thank you so much for being available to this community, and we'll see you guys all next week on Freedom Friday Live. Thank you so much for being here, guys.
Thank you.
Great.
Thank you.